Afternoon, everyone. Hopefully, everyone can hear me all right. So I just want to say a big thank you to the SMA for allowing me to speak at my first academic conference, which is always nice. So yeah, I am Andy. I'm the curator for the Kent Archaeological Society, based in Maidstone. So for those of you who may not know who we are, we're a charity incorporated organisation. We were initially set up in 1857 with the aim of bringing archaeology to everyone. We were picked to the post of being the oldest in the southeast by Sussex, who were 1846, and Surrey, who were founded in 1854, so slightly older than us, but who's counting? And the aim of the society when it was founded was for all of its members to pull together all known antiquities in the ancient county of Kent through purchase and excavation for inclusion in a county museum. While that county museum never materialised, much of the society's collection is held at Maidstone Museum, and many of our groups that are affiliated with us are carrying out their own excavations, generating their own material. And some of them have been at their own fieldwork projects for years, if not decades. And so, as I said, our main aim is to bring the past to the present for everyone through both outreach and education. And alongside our own fieldwork, we also assist, where asked, affiliate groups in their work and with their historic collections, which we get quite a lot of questions on. And one of the challenges that we face is we're based at the Maidstone Community Support Centre, which is a rented charity hub in Maidstone. But we also have our library, our research library and archive, which is accessible to members of the KAS and the public. And Maidstone Museum also house around 5,000 of our objects from our collection, predominantly major Anglo-Saxon cemeteries, which have their own challenges to present. So we're primarily a volunteer organisation, but we do have a small management team made up of paid members of staff. So in putting together this presentation, I kind of had a look for the last time a museum collecting area survey was done in Kent, which I seem to have found was last done in 2013, which the map shows the recorded collecting areas. Now, this is no disparity against the SMA or the ADS for these maps, but there are a few errors on there, which is always fun. So Canterbury's area stretches all the way to the coast, is not a collecting remit, according to my colleagues there. And also major museums such as Maidstone and Dover are not included on the map. And having spoken to a number of the colleagues at these museums, where those museums still exist, the majority of these no longer take in archaeological archives. If they do, they only take in commercial archaeological archives, not community groups, which is obviously the society's main focus. The Archaeological Collections Area database, which is hosted on the ADS, also appears to have been updated in 2013, and that lists Dover, Tunbridge Wells, Dartford, Canterbury and Tenterden as collecting archives. And it does seem to suggest that a lot of the museums at the time never responded to the survey on whether they did or did not collect. Now, as everyone in this room is probably aware, there are a few reasons for museums not taking in archaeological archives, especially of local community groups. And many of these, I'm sure you're all too aware of: staff capacity, the lack of archaeological specialists in museum teams, as we were just hearing, money, which both the museums and the community and even development groups don't have, and particularly for community groups, lacking the skills and knowledge to sort out their archives. So like in the previous presentation, all those guidance that's out there, a lot of it is not focused at the local community sites that have no development funding behind it. Funding is obviously a sore point for many, but that is something that community groups extensively struggle with. So what this often means is that many of the groups do not know where to begin to form a stable, ordered and accessible archaeological archive, which is obviously our aim as we would like it. So on this next one, thanks to this very helpful guide that I found on LinkedIn from Catlip's Creative, I was able to create a map showing the museums listed as being in Kent. However, even with the available OSM data that was in QGIS, this only highlighted 50 museums, while a search on Wikipedia and the Mapping Museums database, which I only learned was a thing last week, which was helpful as I'd already submitted this. There are a lot more. There's about, on the Mapping Museums, there is about 200 in Kent. So if there is no central database of museums in our county, speaking for Kent specifically, telling groups whether they take in archaeological archives, and if so, what their deposition guidelines are, then particularly for community groups, they are bound to struggle to know even where to begin. And this map also highlights one of the problems that Kent and many other counties face, is just how large we are. We have a number of museums, no real centralized resource, and only a single finds liaison officer covering the entire county, which, as you can see, is rather large. And that doesn't include the fact that for the KAS, we cover the ancient borough of Kent, which also includes parts of London, which no longer exist, and the Medway areas as well. As I said, there are many local groups active in Kent, some carrying out their own fieldwork projects, while others focus primarily on sorting and researching their own historic collections. So from a rough survey of the KAS's around about 1,000 members, many of which represent these local groups, collections are housed in all sorts of places. And this is going to hurt all of the archive managers in the room. Garages, people's homes, lofts, under community hall stages, and in shipping containers. I know the conservators in the room are really going to enjoy that one. None of these are sustainable options, nor do they meet the requirements for a stable, ordered, accessible archive, nor does it assist the groups, who often have the best of intentions, ensure that their archives are stored to recognised standards for long-term preservation and made accessible for consultation. So this challenge is looking primarily at the physical archive. Digital archiving is a separate one for community groups, many of which have little to no access to funding, nor the knowledge or support to produce a strong funding bid without external expertise. So this is just some examples of some of the local collections. This one is ours. We were talking about different box sizes. I have lots of really useful boxes of varying sizes. I have lots of museum quality boxes of dubious dates, in rather varied shelving depending on the rented building we were using. This is one of the local groups which have been sorting out their archaeological archives. This is in the basement of a Tesco's, which was great for a while, and then they changed the system, the heating system in there, which has caused some issues. And just to highlight the difficulty of dealing with historic archives, went down into their store with them, spotted this box that you can see up in the corner there, and it was on a site that we've been working on since 2017. And I went, oh, that's weird. Didn't realize you guys had been at that site. Opened the box, Bronze Age hoard sat on top of it. Unrecorded Bronze Age hoard, which was great because that site's already produced 5 of them. And that's now the 6th that I've got to deal with. And that was only due to the fact that the group weren't aware. They didn't know how to deal with some of these archives. They have done the best they can on a shoestring budget with what experience they can gather. So a rough poll I carried out received only a small number of responses, but those that did respond to me included individuals with human remains held in their home, in Gloucester, of all places, and also groups with hundreds of 35-litre boxes, so those size boxes, of containing finds of varying size, varying types, and thousands of photographic films. And this doesn't take into account the commercial units operating in our county, which has expanded greatly over the years, who are also full to the brim, with few, if any, of the museums in Kent taking on archaeological archives. One respondent showed an aspect which many of us may be familiar with, where a community group initially started pre-PPG 16, which worked on both community local interest projects, commercial projects, and so straddled both worlds. Their commercial projects, where they work PPG 16, may have a route to deposition. There may be funding there and written permissions. But the community projects don't have the same governance levels or the national planning policy framework to fall back on. One group which responded had 100 sites in various stages of publication, which represented minor sites. This is their categories, which is 1 box of finds and 1 file of notes. A medium site, 2 to 10 boxes of finds, 2 to 3 files of notes, plans and drawings. And finally, major sites representing 11 to 40 boxes of finds and 3 to 6 files of notes, plans and drawings. So while the majority of this group's sites were only minor, that's still around 100 boxes that are going to need to be housed somewhere. So in early 2024, the KAS were given a bequest by the family of Derek Gray, one of our members who had recently passed away, with the provision that was used for education and increasing access to archaeology. So what we thought is that thanks to this bequest, we were able to purchase a small handheld 3D scanner, and we've been experimenting with this to digitize our collections as a potential option for preservation. If we digitize objects in our collection, could bulk finds, such as ceramic building material, be ethically disposed of? And if so, could this approach be applied to local groups within the county? The benefits of digitization is that firstly, it need not be expensive, which is very important to local groups who are often limited on funds, nor does it need to be technologically difficult. So we use a RevoScan Pop Mini 3. It's fairly straightforward point and shoot, and it doesn't need complicated editing software, which makes it perfect for simple bulk objects like pottery, CBM, and even animal bone. Now, I'm hoping this will let me do it, but it probably won't. No, it won't. That's fine. That is a 3D model of a early medieval Frankish vase, which we took with it. Didn't add the texture, but that's something that we've been able to add later on. If you search for Kent Archaeological Society on Sketchfab, you will find all of our 3D models that are on there. More complicated ones, which we've been experimenting with, so things like disc brooches and coins, we've been experimenting with photogrammetry, which I'd love to claim credit for, but it's not me. My colleague Jacob does all of that digital side and is very good at it. And we're considering whether digital preservation such as this could be something we could offer to local groups as a preservation method. So while it won't solve the storage crisis overnight or even in the next 10 years, and the amount of data it will produce is its own challenge that we need to decide on, it might allow community groups to feel more confident in approaching ethical disposal of bulk collections. So guidance for the county. Kent County Council have also looked at addressing the archival issues facing Kent, although they're primarily focusing their efforts on KCC-led projects and commercial archives. A few years ago, the KCC team carried out a consultation on archive needs, but they only asked the largest active groups in the county. Only one of these groups provided an accurate response, which was an estimate of around 125 boxes that needed archiving. In 2020, they produced a Kent archiving standard, but due to a lack of an archiving system to support the standard, they've been unable to promote it. So it's there, it exists, but none of the units working in Kent can use it because the KCC don't have the facilities to actually manage it, implement it, and utilize it. Compare this with people like Suffolk, who have created their guidance because the council act as the sole repository for all archaeological work in the county and have done so since 1974. So it would be lovely to have something like that in Kent that has an actual practical application. And that's something we're having conversations with them about doing. So just to throw Ben in here, back in 2020, we carried out a survey of KAS members and 77% returned a favourable response towards the idea of a Museum of Kent Archaeology and History. However, at our recent fieldwork forum in March 2025, we raised the idea again with our members. Interestingly, and thankfully on my part, they said that's a terrible idea. Please don't do it. You will instantly run out of money, which is true, and it'll make my job easier. So they threw out the idea of a permanent museum in Kent due to the risk of the financial future of the society. What was, however, suggested was, could the KAS, working with other partners, be involved in establishing an archaeological resource centre using Northamptonshire as a model for the county of Kent? That was received rather favourably. People thought that was a good idea because they see a different use of an archaeological resource centre compared to a traditional museum. So we are now exploring that option with a few different partners, facing the challenges of finding a suitable site, deciding what archives we would take in. Would we be dealing with the commercial side of things, which obviously would have a potential deposition charge involved, or would we be looking at community groups, or would we be looking at both? And ideally, it would need to be placed in a single location. That's not mine, is it? No, it's not. It's usually mine. So it would normally need to be provided in a space for commercial archives that's accessible. As I showed on that large map at the beginning, Kent is really big. We have a lot of units working here now from all across the country. Do we need to consider having two, one for East and one for West Kent? I don't want to throw that suggestion out there too much, but it might need to be considered. So an archaeological resource is the model that we are moving forwards towards potentially. And I'm hoping that kind of attending here with all of the people who are far more experienced in archaeological archives and museums than I am, that potentially there will be some close partnership working, some thoughts. People might tell me, no, don't do that, run away. It's a terrible idea. Or they might come up with a great suggestion on how community groups can take things forwards. So I just want to say thank you. This is just a slight development to show how we went from one slightly varying sized archive to the other. That is for one early medieval cemetery that the Society purchased in 2021 of about 1,700 objects, which has been a fun job over the last 3 years to put that all together. And just to give a sense of the scale of the challenges facing Kent. So thank you very much.